With me here, it's Mr. Salam, or we call him Sini. Is it at home? Sini. You call him Sini at home. Basically, he's the son of Dr. M.P.L. Yegappan, whose book I've written. I think there are a lot of questions on many people's mind. When I arrived yesterday, somebody asked me. I came yesterday for the opening, Tan Tuan Eng's keynote. So somebody asked me, did you actually write this book, or there's a ghostwriter, or your staff wrote it and then, the usual thing? I said, no. Even speeches I write myself today. I try as much as possible to write my own speeches. So I wrote this. Then there's a question, when do you get the time to write this? And who is this guy? Why him? And many questions. When did I write this book? When I did I start to write this book? I think it was a few years ago when I read about this personality in Bukit Mertajam. I come from Bukit Mertajam. My name is Steven Sim, by the way. Yeah. No. We cannot take for granted. I'm not the typical famous politician. My dear good friend from high school introduced me to his uncle. He said that this is not a typical politician because he didn't fail in his exams. I'm not the typical famous politician, rather. Steven Sim from Bukit Mertajam, the Member of Parliament for Bukit Mertajam, and I'm currently the Minister of Human Resources. We call our ministry Kasuma today because when I came in, this is my first year. I'm perhaps 3 or 4 weeks short of first year anniversary in this ministry. When we came in, the ministry was known by the acronym KSM, Kementerian Sumber Manusia. So one of the things that we did was to rebrand to Kasuma after 30 years of being known as KSM. Of course, the internet went crazy and say, you see, that's what ministers do lah. When they come on board, the only thing they can do is to rebrand. Why? Because the cronies are waiting to change the billboard and print new names. So no. The official name of the ministry is still Kementerian Sumber Manusia in Malay, Ministry of Human Resources. But the acronym we changed from KSM to Kasuma, and Kasuma means Kementerian Sumber Manusia, but also ND. Just now somebody from the audience, ND, he showed me his card. He said he's from Karuna Pek. Karuna, of course, is Sanskrit for compassion. I said Kasuma is also Sanskrit. Old Malay word for flower, vitality, hope, but derived from an older Sanskrit word, Kasuma. So I thought it's more beautiful. Somebody told me you should always campaign in poetry and govern in prose. But we thought in Kasuma, we should also put a bit of poetry to our governance and administration. In fact, one of the principles, before I go into the book, just to be an introduction about Kasuma, my publisher is here. He would wish for me, Mr. Choi is here. He was wish for me to promote the book, but let me promote the ministry a little bit. But I think it will be linked. Somehow we'll find a link, Politicians somehow will manage to goreng. But yeah, one of the inspiration for us in Kasuma, being the ministry in charge of labor and workers, is actually a poem. It's a poem by very related to Penang. 100 years ago, the poet was on his way in his world tour around Asia, and he stopped by Penang, landed in Singapore, traveled up all the way from Singapore to Malacca, Johor, and then Kuala Lumpur, and then he came to Penang. Somebody coined the Oriental visit because he was dressed, he was all, white beard, long hair, and black flowing robe. One of the famous Japanese author called it the look of an Oriental visit. And of course, his name is Rabindranath Tagore. And just to read, that poetry which really inspired us in Kasuma. Let me just try to find. This is the 11th chapter of Gitanjali. Gitanjali is this famous poem originally written in Bengali and translated to English, and that was the poem which won him the Nobel Prize for Literature. The first Asian to have won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Of course, we know that first Asian female writer won the Nobel Prize for Literature just about a month ago, South Korea, the writer Han Kang. But this is Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore. And we really loved this poem. It became an inspiration. In fact, it's a sort of unwritten value for us in Kasuma. This is chapter 11 of Gitanjali. Leave this chanting and singing and telling of bits. Whom dost thou worship in this lonely dark corner of a temple with doors all shut? Open thy eyes and see that thy God is not there before thee. He is there where the tiller is tilling the hard ground, where the path maker is breaking stones. He is with them in sun, in shower, and his garment is covered with dust. Put off thy holy mantle, and even like him come down to the dusty soil. Come out of thy meditations, and leave aside thy flowers and incense. What harm is there if thy clothes become tattered and stained? Meet him there, and stand by him in toil and the sweat of thy brow. This was the English translation of Gitanjali, chapter 11. And I translated it into Bahasa Melayu when I joined Kasuma. And just let me read the Bahasa one because not just because I translated it, but because I really love how the language flow in Bahasa. Abaikan pujaan dan kidungan dan ucapan tasbih. Siapa gerangan engkau sembah di sudut sunyi gelap pura pintu tertutup. Buka matamu dan lihat Tuhanmu tidak ada di hadapanmu. Dia ada di sana, di tempat petani mengusaha tanah kerak dan di tempat buruh jalan memecah batu. Dia ada bersama mereka dalam terik dan basah dan busananya disalut lebu. Buang kain sucimu dan jadikanlah macam dia menerjah ke tanah berdebu. Keluar dari petapaan dan ke tepi bunga dan kemayanmu. Apa ruginya kira pakaianmu rabak dan kotor. Ketemulah dia dan dampingilah dia dengan kudrat dan keringat dahimu. We campaign in poetry and we govern with a little bit of poetry. Because I think this is how powerful the poem is. Tagore told a story of a dark temple where the deity is not there. So those who seek the deity, we can only find him in the where the farmers are toiling, where the workers are working on the ground. And he became a principle for us in Kasuma. He said that the workers are not in the air-conditioned room in Putrajaya, and not in our lofty offices, and not in ivory towers. But they are in the factories, on the streets, in the farms. And we've encouraged all our officers, from the minister to the most juniors of officer, to actually turun padang, to meet with workers. And I think in the last 1 year, we have gone to at least 9 unions. We have visited 9 unions. And this is the first time. Every single union offices that I went to, all of them told me, I'm touched. They said that you are the first Minister of Human Resources to have visited their office. And some of these unions are over 100 years old. Because we said that it is important that all of us go down to the ground, look at how the workers function, look at their problem, listen to them, and then solve their problem. This has always been a principle for me in politics. I know, you don't have to tell me, all of you, that politics is bad. There are bad things happening. My colleague Chin Tong is here. I don't think you need to tell us that there are a lot of issues, problems, corruption, bad things happening. We are at the front line. Of course, we know we have to deal with all sides of politics, the good and the bad. The good and the bad. And often, really often, I am very tempted to say, I forget it lah. Sometimes it's a thankless job, People expect you to do something, and if you do it, that's your job. But if you don't do it, you kena. Or sometimes even if you do it, you kena. I remember a story. When I first was first appointed to this office much earlier this year, somebody on the internet, because Singapore announced that they are going to implement flexible working arrangement by the end of this year in December, a few days from now. So, as usual, Malaysians on the internet, you see, Singapore sudah buat, bila Malaysia mau buat? So I thought, being a new minister, I thought, okay, I want to respond to Twitter. And now I said, we have already not just implemented, that it is statutory in Malaysia, because beginning January 2023, flexible working arrangement is enshrined in the Employment Act, 1955 Employment Act. So we have already enforced statutorily provision for flexible working arrangement. And when I look at when I compare the Singapore version and the Malaysian version, almost everything to a sentence is the same. It's the same, right? So I responded. I said, sudah ada. I thought giving that clarification would be sufficient. But mana tahu, as I explained, I kena whack again. Some people even say, wow, you mean to say Malaysia in 1955 already got a flexible working arrangement? I mean, I was citing the Employment Act 1955. Of course, the latest amendment was in 2022. So all sorts of things. I said, alamak. But learning from that lesson, of course, that comment on the internet gave us a lot of feedback and input as well about the gaps in the current practice in Malaysia. So within that span of a few months, today we have already improved on the provision, not on the act itself. The act is there. It's a 2-line, 60p and 60q in the Employment Act, 2-line provision, where we said that a lot of companies and workers, employees and employers, they do not know how to do it because it's just 2-line provision in the ACTA, in the law. So we say, okay, we are going to handhold you. So finally we produced, just last month, a comprehensive guideline. We can handhold the employer and handhold the worker, teach you step by step how you can implement flexible working arrangement within your company. And then not only that, the budget, it was announced by the Prime Minister just a few weeks ago, also gives tax break. So beginning next year, companies that any company that does flexible working arrangement, including your work from home, shorter work hour, etc., will be given a tax break. So we are trying to improve on what we have, but you get what I mean. Sometimes politics can be very tiring because not only you have to deal with the good and the bad, but you have to deal with all sorts of cynicism and pessimism. And I understand. Yeah, I understand the cynicism. I am a rakyat too. Yeah. At the end of the day, when we go home to sleep and when we read the news, sometimes we also get frustrated with what is happening in the country. But so I ask myself, is it worth doing? Is it worth going on? And then I look back, just this year alone, we have moved 8 major labor legislation, improving, for example, the minimum wage, improving occupational safety and health legislation. We've reduced restrictions. I just had lunch with somebody from the electronic industry. And I said, hey, you should join the union. He said, no, we're from electronic industry. We don't join unions because it's not allowed. I said, no. We have already reduced. I've signed into law, reduce government restriction on setting up unions because I believe in union as a platform for workers to have a bigger bargaining power. We have 20 years. The labor provision in Semenanjung, Malaysia, is different from Sabah and Sarawak. Semenanjung is governed by Employment Act. Sabah Labor Ordinance and Sarawak Labor Ordinance. Both of these are federal law, but these are law before Merdeka. So while our Employment Act governing Semenanjung was updated 2 years ago, the last update of the Sabah and Sarawak Labor Ordinance was 20 years ago. So you can imagine, the rights and protection of Sabah and Sarawak workers are much lower. It's 20 years outdated compared to what you have in the Semenanjung. And many ministers, to their credit, were trying very hard to synchronize both acts for the last 20 years. We did it this year. So now, Sabah workers have similar rights and protection to Semenanjung workers. And hopefully before the end of this parliament sitting in mid-December, we will be able to table the latest amendment to the Sarawak Labour Ordinance too. So there are some good things that we can do with these opportunities. But again, it is very tiring, it's very exhausting. So that was where one day, a few years ago, I was reading about Mak Yan or Che Yan. Che Yan is a personality from Bukit Mertajam, the mother of Anwar Ibrahim. Anwar is from BM, my kampung. So as I read about her, I found that she was an elected deputy chairman of BM Town Council when the council when Malaysia has at a local government election. So she was an elected councillor, and then from there she was elected as the deputy chairman or deputy mayor, if you like, of BM Town Council. And I found out that the name of the chairman at that time was one Dr. M.P.L. Yegappan. So that I recall my old friend from high school, Dr. Yegappan Shanugan, who is here, right? And Mr. Wenga, Sani is his father. So I contacted Yegappan. I said, hey, Yegap, this very rare name sounds like your name. So you happen to be related to him? He said, yeah, that's my grandfather. I said, oh, it's interesting. It's your grandfather, okay? So I wanted to find out more about Dr. M.P.L. Yegappan. I began to read. But there's almost nothing on the internet about this guy. But he was the first elected chairman of the BM Bukit Mertajam Town Council. Nothing about him. So I asked Yegappan, do you have any articles or any information about your grandfather? Dr. Yegappan Jr. said, I have not even met my grandfather because he has passed on before I was born. He said, but my dad may have something. So he asked Mr. Sani, and he gave me a 2-pager of a sort, or 3-pager, his own biography of his father. And as I read the biography, I felt very encouraged. I said, hey, this is the kind of values, politics that that inspire me to join politics in the first place. 2007, almost 2 decades ago. Time flies very fast. So I thought, I'm very inspired, to read of people who have, gone before us, who have seen through difficult times, who have gone through conflicts and crises that we are going through. So that there is nothing new under the sky. There's nothing new under the sun, so said the poet. So I said, okay, I want to find out more. And as I read and I research, I begin to collect materials just for my own interest, because I think that was towards the end of November 2020. So we were just emerging out of the worst time of the pandemic. We were around this period of the pandemic, and everyone was at home. So trying not to gaduh too much with the wife, I decided to do some study. This is joking. My wife is a brilliant, excellent, long-suffering spouse of a politician. So I began to read more, and I collected materials. I wanted to complement the 3-pager that Mr. Ringa wrote. And one thing led to another. I found that, we have gone very advanced in writing about this man. And I found information which the family didn't even know. For example, his candidacy as Adun for Butterworth, and what are the arguments that went behind. Of course, they knew that he was contesting, but what were the arguments that got behind? Some of the contribution he did as a councillor, and then later on mayor. And one very, very important element during this study was, of course, discovering my hometown, Bukit Mertajam. Right, I'm a Bukit Matajam boy. I grew up in Bukit Matajam. Moved from the island to Bukit Matajam when I was 3. Grew up there, went to school in Bukit Matajam, married a Bukit Matajam girl, and we built our family there. Our son is born in Bukit Matajam. But it's an old town of almost 200 years old, but there are many gaps in its history. So as I was researching, I learned more. I mean, of course, the social political history of Bukit Matajam, of the new Chinese new villages, for example, the elections that was conducted, the insurgencies, how the High Commissioner of the colonial government actually visited the small town of Bukit Matajam 3 times in 4 months. It's like the Prime Minister visiting a small town 3 times in 4 months because of a crisis. The hospitals, the schools, the temples, the social structure. So that was also a discovery of my hometown to me. And then one highlight of the book was USM, University Science Malaysia. The family didn't know this. I didn't know this. USM probably didn't know this. Because in 1979, on the 10th anniversary of the establishment of USM, the university came up with a book. And in that book, they cited an important motion in the State Assembly. And USM recognized that this motion was the foundation of the establishment of USM. Many names were cited. Tunku Abdul Rahman, of course, was the Prime Minister at that time. Tan Sri Wong Pao Ni, our Chief Minister. D.S. Ramanathan was originally the opposition leader in Penang and then subsequently joined the alliance to become one of the exco of Wong Pao Ni. Tun Razak was cited. K.O. Johari was cited. These are all important figures that play a huge role in the setting up of University Science Malaysia in Penang. But that motion was actually tabled in the State Assembly by Dr. M.P.L. Yegappan. And his name was left out. Almost forever if we have not discovered it, right? So I thought that was something very personal to me, to recover this person who has contributed to Bukit Matajam, to Penang, and to Malaysia during our formative years, post-Merdeka, and whose name has largely been forgotten. It was not easy to write this book, but I think because it was difficult, somehow it became like a solace and a consolation for me. I can take my mind off. In these days, it's not easy to excite me because of all the stimulations that you have in this very exciting world of politics. And every day you're fighting, in this ministry, you have to fight. I always tell people, I have to fight 3 sort of cartels. You have to fight the foreign worker cartels. You have to fight the Perkeso false claim cartel. We have managed to bring down one of them. Over 30 people were arrested in June. We have to fight, of all things, skills education cartel. You would think that education is a polite sector. It is huge cartel going on there. So we had to fight all that. And very exciting. Always very driven, always in the high. So in order to get a break, sometimes on weekends you can't really rest because your adrenaline is just rushing all the time. So this complicated project actually took my mind away and give me a bit of a break. Why I say it's complicated? In the foreword I said it is easier to write about Churchill. Not because it is easy to analyze Churchill, but because there's so much materials available about Churchill by him and about him. But not so with Dr. M.P.L. Yegappan. And how is it with our record keeping. I went to archives. I went to Penang Archive, KL Archive, State Assembly, Parliament, Singapore, some, what do you call it, information from England, India, and of course the family was very, very helpful. But official records were not there. I was trying to be, to keep to the integrity, the fidelity to history and to the man himself. There were almost 200, almost 300 footnotes because I wanted this to be as close as possible to that person and his time. So we dug out, and I think one contribution was to push the State Assembly to actually find back Hansard, basically the records and minutes of the State Assembly at that time. When I started this project in 2020, November, we couldn't find anything on the State Assembly Hansard for that period, right, in the early 50s. That was the first State Assembly post-Merdeka, right? We can't find anything. But towards the end of the project, somehow somebody in the State Assembly perhaps already, we ganggu them semua, we kacau them so much. Almost every other week, I'll send somebody new, That fella must be thinking, ini orang, they think that he sent different people, then I will get the different result. It's the same result. There's none. But finally, we found records, Hansard records from those periods. And I have to go through, imagine reading through, these are not searchable documents, these are scanned documents. So I have to read through. But it was so amazing to read through debates of that time, politicians of that time. And I can tell you, if you don't tell me about the good old days, politicians are the same every period. There's no good old days. All of us have to try very hard, every generation, to ensure that nation building continues in the direction that we want. So there's no good old days. Everyone, to each our own, we have to strive our best. And of course, his contemporary, they are almost, most of them are no more. Those who are around are very old and unable to give us much information. So I depended really, really a lot on the family, especially Mr. Venga and my friend Dr. Yegappan. But at the end of it, I personally am very proud of this project. This is not my first Georgetown Lit Fest. Few years ago, I came here to promote my book on Hang Tuah. It's a Bahasa Melayu book, one of my proudest projects, because I did a socio-political commentary on the literature itself, on Hikayat Hang Tuah. But today, I'm very proud of this project because as a member of parliament for Bukit Mertajam since 2013, I felt that this is one way that I give back to my small town, Bukit Mertajam. Yeah, he was one of the, not just one of the earliest councillor in Bukit Mertajam, but if you know, some of you who are old enough, if you know that there's this party called the Penang Radical Party, yeah, or better known as Lim Chong Yu's first party, right? You talk about Katak, Lim Chong Yu has 3 or 4 parties, right? I'm not calling him a Katak, he's one of my idol in Penang. But think about all these commonly accepted notions about politics that we have today, local government election, party hopping, etc., etc. And then we look back and then we realize that these are all not new. And there are sometimes, because we look back, then we realize that, hey, it's not too bad, lah. Perhaps it was necessary. I'm not suggesting anything, but I think that was lesson really to me. But more importantly, it was a consolation, therapeutic, in fact, to me, to tell this story of a good man. I call him a good man in politics. I'm just going to end by quoting just a para, or maybe a few paras in the book about why I wrote the book. And then I'll hand it to Mr. Venga, who probably know more about his father. Mr. Venga's third brother, Dr. Raj, is here. Dr. Raj Tiagarajan, yes. He asked me to call him Dr. Raj. When I met him, how old is he? He's 78 this year. When I met Dr. Raj at the door, I said, I'm so tempted to say I read about you, but I actually wrote about you. So there are a few lines about you here. But anyway, I said this. The answer to bad politics is not no politics. The answer to bad politics is good politics. But good politics is self-effacing. When there is good politics, newspaper headlines will focus on the successes of human endeavors, educators nurturing the next generation, doctors and nurses saving lives, architects, engineers, and scientists constructing monumental human edifices in all fields, workers building our society, and artists entertaining and expressing our deepest existential sentiments. Compare this to the news headlines we are all too familiar with. Politicians appear on every other page announcing, saying, launching, or doing something, or being caught by the authorities for breaking something. It is as if the only human endeavors worthy of our new space are those related to politicians. Perhaps the best way to illustrate good politics is by recounting a story like that of Dr. M.P.L. Yegappan. His heart of service took him from being an ordinary person living under the constraints of the British Empire to becoming a politician who midwife a new independent nation. It was then that he chose to throw in his hat, put himself on the deck, and became part of the solution to the problems of his time. And as a politician, Dr. M.P.L. Yegappan led a very low-key life of public service, focusing on addressing the practical problems of our new nation at that time. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, members of the media, and friends, good morning to all of you. To say that I'm very happy and proud to be sitting up here would actually not be doing justice to the occasion, because it's something that's happened just like that. It evolved, and I must tell you how it all happened. To talk about the making of this book, if you can bide with me just for a while, I won't take much time. I don't have a Kusuma and all that to talk about. So I will just talk about the book and how that book came about to be. To do justice to the book, I must actually transport you back about 70 years to what this country was then. It was a young country, vibrant country, on the verge of achieving independence. And it was in the early 1950s. That was when the first elections, town council elections, were taking place all over the country. And Bukit Merajam was one such town. It was a bustling town, economics, politics. It was a hive of politics. I was young at that time. I was born in 1953. My brother 1946, so he knows a bit more. But I was the one interviewed for this book. What I knew really actually comes from my childhood memories. I remember a lot from the time I was young, about actually 3.5, 4 years old. So 1957 and all that, I remember quite much. But before that, not much, but stories from my mother, from what I've read. I'm an avid student of history, of literature. So like our Honorable Stephen Sim, YB. So the first town council elections, it was a very vibrant town. And that was when into this town came a young doctor, my father, our father. That's my brother there. So in 1949, he set up his private clinic there because he was in government service. They were going to transfer him all the way to Negeri Sembilan, far away. And he had been away from his family in India for 6 years, studying away from the young children. So he was appealing to them, can you please give me a place, Taiping or Alostar nearby? I can visit the family on weekends. They said no. It was under the British administration at the time. Then he took the bold decision to resign from government service, unheard of in those days. Government service was a guaranteed, a career source of income. It was during the emergency, and he set up the first private clinic in Bukit Merajam. But it just flourished so well. He was a man of the people. He while serving the people, he learned, of course, Bahasa Malaysia he knew, but he learned Chinese dialects, so he could converse with all those Chinese people who came from the new villages, and somehow he endeared himself to the people of Bukit Merajam, and he went on to politics. And he was elected, as our YB Stephen said, as a town council chairman. And that was it. He was active. He was the state council, executive council, with our Tan Sri Wong Pauni as the chief minister. All of them came from Bukit Mertajam. Bukit Mertajam, for that matter, was the bedrock, one of the bedrocks of politics in Malaysia, in Malaya then. And that was where I would say, and I don't think I'm wrong, the future, the politics of the Penang state, and even for that Malaysia, would have been determined. These are the men who grew up and went on to found the country. He was a good father to us, but most of his time was spent serving the community and in politics. So we saw little of him. But the bits and pieces of time that we spent with him, he was a very kind man. And it was up to our mother who raised us up, but it was a happy family. And by observing our father and hearing about him, so we inculcated the values of integrity and honor, and how important self-respect was, and how important respecting your fellow man was. These are the things that we learned when we were small. Okay, from school, but more from real life. And then he passed away. Life went on. Now, I will fast forward to 2007. That was when, like what our YB said, my father had quietly faded away into oblivion. Bukit Mertajam flourished. It produced a lot of more important politicians, including and especially our present Prime Minister, YB Anwar Ibrahim, and like that, and Stephen Sim. I'll get on to him later. So in 2007, Dato Dr. N. Subramaniam from Kuala Lumpur, he was the retired head of the ONG department in Kuala Lumpur GH, and also a past president of the Malaysian Medical Association. And he was the president of the Nagaratar community from which we all hail, Chettiars. So he was compiling history, stories, anecdotes, articles on prominent people in the community. And he had identified my father, our father, as one of them. In 2007, he requested me, is it possible you can write something about your father? He said, it's a well-known name in our circles, but we don't know much about the background. So I said, not a problem at all, because I had all these articles, I had all these photographs, and I remembered all the stories that my mother told me, the elders in the family, and people in Bukit Mertajam. So many things all here. And I said, yes. So it was actually 3 pages, but it was a concise, it was actually 8 or 9 pages. I made it, they said, don't make it long, put it into 3 pages. And that's it. And a year later, our Dato Sri Ramanathan from Penang, he's a businessman, Karakuri restaurant, all you all may know. And also he's the president of the Penang Nagaratar Heritage Society. He was compiling a book on prominent personalities in Penang. And he asked me, I had this article, I elaborated a bit more. And that was it. And 2007, 2009. In 2020, that's another, 11, 12 years later, my son, that's Chanu, stand up, let them see you. He's my son. So he's the former classmate of YB Stephen. He works in the Lamboye Hospital. He's a consultant gynecologist there. But that's another matter. He was YB Stephen Sim's classmate. And they had been classmates from Standard 1. And their network, I'm very proud to say there are about 6 or 7 of them. And until today, after they left school, they still keep a close touch with each other. They meet up regularly and all that. I remember them when they were boys. So they were in Form 1 and Form 2, and after school, and there would be activity at 3 o'clock, the 2 hour break. Then they would come over to my house. And one day my wife had made puri, and this potato curry. Okay. And they just got so, they really fell in love with that. And each time they would come, they would ask for that. One day my wife had made some chicken kurma. She's a good cook. She had makes fabulous chicken kurma. And then they ate it. They politely declined. They said, "Auntie, next time can we have that potato curry?" and that's how their friendship. But I could not remember him. They were in Form 1 at that time, and then Form 5, and then they went on. So in about 2020, my son said, "Stephen," the name rang a bell, but I had forgotten the face. He said, "He's now a politician and all that." I said, "Yes, 2018, I know he was there under the DAP in the new Pakatan government and all that." So he said he would like to write a book about grandfather, and or rather, how it came about. He had, like he said earlier, he said, "Your name is Yegappan. Are you in any way connected to this person?" And he said, "My grandfather." So one thing led to another. So he said, "Can I speak to your father?" He came over to my house. And this time, this was after how many years? Now he was the honorable deputy minister, later minister. But I was not overawed. I had known him from small. But he put me at ease, and he explained why he wanted to write this book. And I was very touched. And he asked me. And I had so many stories. I gave him the hard copy of what I had. Then I had so many photographs from my grandfather. Actually, our grandfather had come to Malaya in 1900. So I got photographs from 1910, 1920, all those old photographs. And he was so excited by that. He said, "This book I'm writing, this kind of information and all these photographs will give a human touch to it. And instead of it becoming a boring political memoir." And so we worked together. I contributed what I could. My brother, Dr. Tyagarajan, many times I would talk to him on the phone. Of course, he was older than me. He could remember things that I did not. He would tell me. My sister from Canada, Mrs. Tamayendi Nagappan. So she on the phone would tell me. And we all worked together, and I started writing more and more. And each time he interviewed me, I would tell him orally. What I would tell him orally on the spot, Stephen would be typing it out onto his, his laptop quickly, very, very nimble, very fast fingers. And he would just, and all that. And he said, I don't want to miss out on this. Later, I'll go and write it down. And that's how this book came about. And so a lot of information. And as I was talking to him, somehow all old recollections, old memories of my days in Alosta, and my mother and my grandfather. And in fact, my grandfather, my mother's father, and I had actually told him, he asked me, "Your mother?" I said, "Lakshmi, daughter of Nagappa Chettiar." And I said, he was a prominent tin miner and a rubber magnate in Alosta with a lot of friends, Malay friends, Chinese friends. That's all I said. But he had gone into the archives, and you'll see it in the book. There are about 1 or 1.5 pages. He came out with information that I would not know. He actually got it from the archives. So this has made the book a better book instead of just old stories coming from a person. And I know this because I went through the draft. Today only I'm seeing the hard copy. I saw the last draft, and when I read it, I just fell in love with it because it was a complete book, a book about a man, his family life, and about his social service. And it has been written in such a beautiful, the writing is all his. You can see it's all his. He's just quoted me, and there are a lot of footnotes. But, and I have to say this in front of him. I was very impressed that at such a young age, a person can have such a command of the language. Today, it's a well-known fact that the standard of English has deteriorated, not really that much, but it's not as good as what it used to be. But YB Stephen, he writes with a flair. I'm a writer myself. For me, it's literature, and some people tell me that I write well. So for me to read it and to appreciate that, I could see this man, he writes, and it's from the heart. To read something that is grammatically correct and in proper prose is one thing, but to read something that comes from the heart is another. There is a saying from Khalil Gibran, which many of you will know: what comes from the mouth only reaches a ear, but what comes from the heart reaches the heart. So when you read this book, I think many of you will understand what I mean. So that's a book. And I asked him after a few times of meeting and interviews and all that, I said, why are you doing this? And he told me, Uncle, I'm in politics. I said, yes, I've seen in TikTok, I've seen in interviews and all that and everything, and we know. You're a man of the people, okay, fine. Integrity and compassion for the people and everything, and people think highly of you, I know that. He said, I like to go deep into things. So when I became the member of parliament for Bukit Matajam, I wanted to know what Bukit Matajam was all about. So I went and delved into the history. And there in 1953-54 came up these names. Dr. M.P.L, Yegappan, Wong Pawnee, and all that. And all these names after that in 60s and 70s and 80s, the names lived on. But somehow after the mid-60s, Dr. M.P.L. Yegappan's name faded into oblivion. But that short span of time, 1954, 52 to 50 to 65 or so, I could see from my research, exhaustive research is done. I could see from my research that he had actually gone down onto the ground, like he said, turun ke padang, and served the people and endeared himself to the people. And I find that his principles of politics are very, very much, or rather, he said, his principles of politics are uncannily familiar to that of Dr. M.P. Yegappan. So that spurred him another reason to write this book. So he said, I just felt I had to do it to a forgotten man. I had to revive his memory. I had to let the people know Bukit Matajam is such a prosperous town now, so almost a city, and they must know how it all started. So that really touched me. So I thanked him profusely, and I thank him now in front of all of you. And his words, the Honorable Stephen Sim Chee Keong, his words and actions remind me, I read quite a bit in Chinese literature, English literature, Indian literature. But of all those sayings that come to mind, one particular saying means a lot to me. It's an old Chinese saying. It is very simple. When you drink water from the well, remember the well diggers. So, what he has done reminds me of that proverb. And I think I speak on behalf of all of you, the good people here. And I thank YB Stephen for what he has done. And I think I speak on behalf of all of you when I wish him well, and that we all believe, as do so many others outside, that he and people like him will go on to lead the state and even the nation to greater heights. So with that, I thank all of you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Venga. I tell you, I think, I want to thank them for their patience as well, because, I appeared in their house one fine day and then claim to want to write about their father, gotten so much information from him, and yet after 1 year the book is not out, 2 years the book is not out. In fact, I finished it, 2 year plus, but even after the book was done, the book is not out yet because there are so many background works to be done. I thank them for their patience, for trusting in me with all the information and trusting in me to deliver this memoir for their father. But I also want to thank my publisher, Mr. Chua from World Scientific, as well as is Ross here? Ross is not here. Ross was my editor and also co-publisher from Clarity House. I want to thank them for their patience, and I think this is my 5th book, but I think this is one of the best quality what do you call it, editorial that has been done. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you. Terima kasih.
I'm sorry, I failed to thank Mr. Mr. Chua from World Scientific, and also, of course, at the same time, all those who worked with YB Stephen, Radiance Leong, and then the other supporting team. If not for all of you, this book would not be a reality. Thank you.